Hi, I'm Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Theresa Mathews, author of Fishing with Hyenas. Theresa, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
All right, you ready to get started?
I am.
Here we go. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of advice out there. The one thing I think that I would recommend is to not get so hung up on the end product and the total book and, oh my gosh, I'm going to write a book, that you can be bogged down and overwhelmed by the enormity of that. Stay in the weeds, keep writing, word by word, or as Anne Lamott would say, bird by bird. Just let the writing flow, and pretty soon you'll have a book.
And I think that's one of the main things. I think done is better than perfect. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And the other thing I really feel is there's multiple phases of writing a book. You have the editing, the publishing, the marketing, all of those things are different phases, but the first thing is just get the words out, keep writing, and eventually you'll have a book that you can, you finally got there. So that's what I think. Don't look at the end product before you get through the process of getting those words out.
And that ties into our next question, and that is, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Sure. So my journey was a little bit different in that I self-published, but I didn't know I was going to self-publish. So when I was ready to put my book out to the world, I was really overwhelmed, and things had changed from the time I had the idea of the book to the time I actually finished and was looking for an editor. So I planned on going the traditional publishing route, which was pretty overwhelming. And for me, it was writing that perfect query letter, getting the pitch. I don't know why the marketing piece of that was the hardest part for me, and knowing that I would have to go through, all these pitch sessions or, writing my query letters and potentially being rejected by a lot of the big houses that I wanted to rep my book. In the process of finding looking for a professional editor, I came across the perfect person for me to partner with, and she owned a full-service production company, so unbeknownst to me, I self-published. So in my journey, the hardest part of that way to go was that it's expensive, and you're relying on yourself and you're the person who helps get you there, and hope that it's good enough, and then just let it go. So, it's kind of a multi-layered answer, but that was the route that I took, so a little different journey.
Well, and I'm glad you touched on marketing, because our next question is going to be that I'd like for you to please share a marketing strategy that you've used in your book launch that worked well.
Yep, absolutely. So the first thing I did was, obviously tell everyone you know, and have them tell everyone they know that you've got a book that you're launching, because you just want to spread the word. If you have email addresses, email campaigns are phenomenal. Surprisingly, it works really well. Social media, all of those things, to just let people know you've got this book coming out. The other thing I did was a lot of research. What's the best way to market? How do you get your the marketing strategy? Like, what do I do now? And in my research, what I did was I read through multiple websites, Jane Friedman. I stumbled across yours. You've got lots of great ideas as well. And there's lots of really strong publishing platforms out there. And as I research, I look for common themes. What makes sense to me? Oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Some things took me down too many rabbit holes. So I just tightened things up, and I took all the things that made sense and that I saw a common theme throughout all of the platforms in the research I did, and I created my own recipe in the social media and how I was going to get out there. And just I think the other thing was combining all of that. I reached out to my local bookstore, and I started with a big launch party and a book signing and release. So those are the things I did, and it really pushed a nice, the first quarter of launching my book. I had great success. And it's continued from there, but I think that was the biggest thing.
Well, and you bring up a lot of great concepts. One thing I'd like to have you elaborate a little bit more on is basically how do you set up the process for book signings? Because several of our guests have talked about that, and I'd love for you to share the process and how you can get a book signing set up locally.
Sure. So there's lots of ways to do it, which I found at first it was a little overwhelming. It's like, what do I do? What are the rules? Well, in this business, I think every rule is meant to be adjusted or broken to suit the author, what works for you. And I think that allows us to take a big breath, take a pause, and just say, how do I want to do this? So the first thing really is to find your local bookstores or whichever avenue or platform, library that you like to attend. Contact the person in charge of those special events and say, I'm about to launch a book. I'm a local author. How do I do it? And they'll tell you what their format is. Maybe attend. I think it's really important to attend a couple of book launches in your area to see how other people are doing it. And maybe say, oh, I like that, or I probably wouldn't do it that way. That doesn't suit me. And pretty soon you start to develop more confidence, and you kind of develop your own way of doing it. So I recommend you want to read a little bit about your book, but just a little bit. And most of it is telling a story and interacting with the audience once you're there. Am I getting off point? I tend to do that.
No, that's great, because I think storytelling is key. It's one of the things I always talk about with our audience is the best way to build a relationship with your reader is storytelling. That's through your books, that's through your website, and also in person. If you have those opportunities to read part of your book to the audience, it's one of the best ways to do that. So no, storytelling I think is one of the most important things.
Absolutely. And I also learned through a few events that I did is keep your reading to a minimum, because you'll lose your audience. Even though it might be really captivating, read as little as possible just to hook them, get them excited. But mostly it is that back and forth, talk about the book, talk about the story and the journey. But people really want to know the author, and so what brought you to write the story? What's it about in a really short term? And then just get to know your audience. And I felt like that it's so easy. It's an easy format, and it helps you stay calm and collected, and you just continue to tweak the way you do things, and it's really fun.
Well, excellent. I thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of our local authors are interested in going into book signings and to looking at those. And there's two reasons for that. One, it's a great way to promote your book. But also, as you know, when you buy a book in bulk, let's say you buy 100 copies, maybe it costs you around $300, and then you can sell each of those for $10 each. You make a pretty nice little profit margin, and you get to build relationships with your local readers.
Absolutely. And it really means a lot to the readers when they've had a chance to meet you and you're doing a two-way conversation. They're learning about you and your story and the book and everything else, and you're getting to know them, and getting to know your readers is really important, I think, as an author, to continue being successful in selling more books and connecting with your readers, because they'll tell all their friends, and it's really exciting for them to meet an author.
Well, and speaking of books, I'd like to know, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
I love the start of any question that says, what is your favorite X? Because there's too many to choose from. But the one that grabs me and was my first response to this question is The Art of Racing in the Rain. Love, love, love that book. And the number one thing I learned from that is something I knew about already, but the book, the way it was written, it brought it front and center and became really clear for me. And it's love always wins, and that which you manifest is before you. I mean, it's such a simple message that we see in many, many formats, but for me, this was such a beautiful, well-written story. It just kind of was like a shaking me on the shoulder saying, when you live that way, when you're thinking about what you want and what you don't want, you actually get it, and you have a more peaceful, beautiful way of life. So anyway, it was that was kind of it for me.
Okay. And our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
So I'm going to grab two because I can't just stick to one. I love this one. Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And that one's kind of obvious. It's like, go for what you want. Just shoot for it. And if things change and you get close, well, you still went for it. And so you're going to feel great about your effort, because you cannot reach your goals unless you just go for it. The other one is, you cannot have a perfect garden with sunshine alone. And that rings true for, my book is about a lot of things, and life is about a lot of things. We have all the emotions, we have tragedies and horrible things. And if we're lucky, like most of us, we have love and beauty and joy and all of those things. And I think by having all the bad, awful things happen in life too, it just makes the good a little bit sweeter, and it makes us appreciate the total balance of the life we live.
Now, Theresa, I want to thank you for being a guest on our show today. Now, what is the best way for people to find you online?
Sure. So I'm on the social media platforms under my name, Theresa, which is Theresa, last name Mathews with only one T. But you can find me on my website, which is simply Theresa-Mathews.com.
All right, Theresa. Well, thank you for once again being a guest on our show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.